Our next guest is Melissa Ness, who is the president of Connections Unlimited. She's a recognized expert in Kansas for designing and implementing advocacy programs with a special emphasis on understanding the aspects of the legislative process and leadership development. She earned her undergraduate and master's degrees at KU and is also a Washington Law grad. So, welcome.
Thank you. You can see that all of this you hear today is inextricably linked. And my charge to you today, what I'm going to do is first give you a bit of an overview. I decided after about 4 hours yesterday, literally 4 hours, trying to think about what do I need to tell you, I decided I erased the PowerPoint. But I am going to give you some characteristics and what we see as trends in the child welfare system. And then what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about, in particular, what some of those characteristics mean and the impact. Annie has given you the budget framework and context. And then I'm going to give you what my husband is now referring to as the same old advocacy rant. But it's a little bit different. So, advocacy and public policy services, as I said, I've been involved for quite a long time. And we do have to think differently about how we serve children and family. So I'm really glad Annie spoke about the budget, gives you the context, because even though everybody is saying the issue is the budget, it is, but we're going to skate this year because we have that $280 million, and there's enough to draw from so that the real issue is not what's going to happen at the end of the year. It's 2017, and I'm here to remind all of you that you have 2 years before the next election. And after hearing Annie and Sheldon last week, one of the other things I do from a project and an advocacy strengthening standpoint is I work with the Sunflower Foundation and their Sunflower Health Advocates. They now have 64 health advocates across the state who know about community organizing, who know about media, who know about the legislature, and know how to take it back into their organization and operationalize their advocacy work. But I say that because after listening to Sheldon and Annie on Wednesday, then having a meeting on Thursday with somebody who was talking to me about the shifts, the structural shifts in DCF, the Department for Children and Families, I was awake all Thursday night. And that hasn't happened to me for years. But I was awake all Thursday night because I figured, what do we do to really grow the ability to tell our story? And that's what you need to do. And I know this sounds very rudimentary, but now more than ever, it is the time to speak to your public officials, to your neighbors, to your community partners about what the impact is of the revenue losses in the state of Kansas on the state's most vulnerable populations. Now's the time. And maybe I've gotten to the rant before I've gotten to the characteristics, and I probably have. But one of the things, again, if you hear people say over and over, we've got a spending problem, not a revenue problem, that is not the case. That's not the case. We cannot cut ourselves back into support for the most vulnerable children and families in the state of Kansas. It can't be done. And I know legislators here know this, but they have a very small piece of the pie they get to move around. So your message at the local level is we need more revenue. Now, one of the things, and I'll probably steal Annie's thunder for later, but one of the things she pointed out when you're talking about the estimates in the state, the consensus estimate group gets together, and gee, the next time you hear it come out, you may say, oh wow, we get those estimates. But they have slowly been revising those estimates in revenue downward, and again, stealing Annie's thunder here, to the point where the goal is below ground. And that's exactly, if we're here to figure out how can we move forward, we've got to begin to message this in a way that people hear that in this state we need more money for the people and for the children and families we serve and are partnered with. Okay, so just a little bit about what's happening in child welfare. When I talk about child welfare, typically child welfare is family preservation, foster care, and adoption. But everything and most of the services that are provided in the community are inextricably linked with what's happening to children and families who are in the foster care, family preservation, adoption system. Now, I know there are some people in here that, again, we've walked the halls, we've done community work for years, but I can tell you what you're seeing in the foster care system on one hand is deja vu all over again. What we're seeing, we are seeing record numbers of kids coming in to the child welfare system, into foster care. And I'll talk a little bit about some assumptions around that. But last year, fiscal year 2014, there were, let's see, I want to make sure I get this right. There were over 65,000 reports to the child abuse hotline. 65,000. Now, when you think about what in your business, if you had 65,000 phone calls, at the same time we are reducing government capacity, and in Department of Children and Families and in KDHE, just think about that impact alone. So of those 65,000, 24,000 of those were assigned to investigation of maltreatment, child abuse, and about 11,000 were assigned to the assessment of child in need of care, what we call child in need, non-abuse, non-neglect. So there's reasons that kids are coming into care, and that has been an old demarcation for a very long period of time. But we see the swings back and forth. Again, last month we met the highest number of kids coming in to the foster care system. The November caseload estimates, and one of the things some of you already know, but it's something you need to pay attention to. Again, the consensus caseload estimating group comes in, takes a look at the Medicaid projections and foster care. They're predicting another $10 million increase in foster care expenditures in 2017, with a continued growth of more kids coming into care. Again, from an overall system standpoint, it's really difficult to say this is exactly why. And let me just give you, kids are coming into care at a higher rate, but I'm going to give you some examples. One of the things I started doing as I work again for St. Francis Community Services, we have an advocacy program that really works within the organization to do community engagement and to really educate our own staff about advocacy. Public policy is certainly a part of it. What we're starting to hear from our workers and some of our focus groups are there, and we don't have specific numbers on this yet, but there are more people coming into care because they can't keep their family together because of housing, transportation, they lose their driver's license, they don't have access to food and shelter, all those basic needs. But if you go in and you look and you try to find a statistic that will tell you how many kids coming into the foster care system came from families living at or below the poverty level, you can't find it. You can't find it with specificity. So one of the things we're doing in our organization is beginning to really take a look at it. The data's out there. The data's out there. You've got to find it, you've got to capture it so you can tell the story. We do know that, and we can make safe assumptions. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the reasons that kids are coming into care. You can't ignore the fact that factors affecting children and families served by the child welfare system, one of the issues is poverty, and you can break that down any way you want to, but I know all of you know that even in one of the richest nations in the world, we have one of the highest poverty rates in the world, and it's no different in Kansas. Kansas Action for Children, I'm sure you've all been to their website with the kids count data. You should look at it all the time. You can tell, you can track by county what's going on. That's one of the things we can do as advocates, is you have to stay educated. In terms of the number of kids coming into care, you have to go to the DCF website, and I can tell you, and I was thinking about it on the way over here, once I said, oh, I'm not going to do a PowerPoint. I am going to give Karen a list of additional websites where you can find child welfare-based information, because guess what? It's moving around. The same place I looked the last time is at a different place this year. So you have to really know where to go to get the information. Poverty certainly is one of those issues that impacts kids coming into care, especially single-parent families. And as we know, there's a disproportionate number of children in the system who are not, who are of color. In addition, what we're facing with the child welfare system and others, it's a workforce issue. And if you look at even at foster homes are flat. but the number has increased almost exponentially over the last few years. So foster homes, workers in the child welfare system. We have workers that come in and say to us, we did not know this was going to be the kind of work we were going to have to do. It's high stress, high level work, and the deja vu all over again is we're not only seeing cases coming in, but higher caseloads. And you have to keep those caseloads down in order to get kids home. And in order to get kids home, you have to deploy some of the resources at the back end of the system. But when you have the front end of the system exploding, permanencies are going to drop, and you're going to have kids stuck in that bubble again. So again, the focus on the front end of the system. Homelessness is certainly another reason we see for kids coming into the system. Law enforcement removal with more stress on the system. Workers again are feeling the pressure of increased caseloads. What we hear by surveying law enforcement is that they do not want to take the risk to send somebody home, so they put them in police protective custody. One of the things I work with is one of the citizen review panels, and what they are doing is looking at what happens after police protective custody. Where do those kids go? And what do you think? It's different all around the state, and we don't have good data. So we've decided that's one of the pieces of the pie we're going to look at. Where are those kids going, and how can we slow the front end? And as someone who works for an organization that provides services to children and families, we have to use those people as our experts. And I don't mean to say those people, but the people that we care for, we work with, they are the experts on what they need prior to having to intervene in a very intrusive and invasive way. One of the main reasons, and you'll see this, and this is one of the things I had to look at on the website. What do you think is the main reason kids coming to care? Anybody? Parents that are incarcerated, what else? Poverty, abuse, what else? Neglect? Substance abuse. Number one reason kids come into care is substance abuse by them, but most importantly, their parents. When you have needles and drugs lying on the table and you go in, that's neglect. Kids come out. And more judges, and this is again the deja vu all over again, judges, law enforcement are looking at taking kids out, being safe, because we know they'll at least get some services in the child welfare system. But the child welfare system relies on the community services also. So another reason kids are coming in. But parental substance abuse, number one. So what it tells you, and again, if you start looking at, well, what do we do about that? One of the first things we have to understand are we putting enough resources to be able to identify how much of a risk it is when there is parental substance abuse that children come in, and then develop a solution for it. So poverty, homelessness, law enforcement. And the one that really concerns me the most is putting parents in a position of having to give up custody in order to access care. We talked about this 15 years ago, and you are now hearing it again. I don't know any other way. You take them, I can't do this. One of the things to keep in mind too, when you think about the child welfare system, there is a residential care component. And we have one of the lowest residential percentages in the state of Kansas. Because the philosophy is keep kids at home, keep them safe, look at their well-being, and work toward permanency. Okay, let me jump ahead since I haven't looked at anything practically on the sheet before I turn it over to Sheldon. So what do we do next? And again, specifically, the messages. Create your messages. We need more revenue in the state. I was looking at, revenue is not going to fix a lot of the problems that we're seeing long-term. I asked one of the agencies I work for this morning, to give me the latest on their statistics about foster care for the month of October, for the month of November, because it's not on the website yet. We're still creeping up on foster care. Permanencies are still up, but out-of-home care and aftercare is really at an all-time high. And when kids go into aftercare, if kids come back into the system, the same service providers have to take care of them with no additional funding. So it's really important that we keep kids out of the system, we give them the services they need while they're in, and we get them to permanency as soon as we can. So, key to good advocacy, think about your focus, maintain a stable focused presence, develop your own issue expertise, develop partnerships, and I'm not talking about a large scale. You know, I really followed the rules when Karen said, I want you to think about now, what coalitions can they join. There's a lot of coalitions people in this room can join and be a part of. But in your organization and in the work you do in your community, I really challenge you to take more of a collective leadership approach to advocacy. And that question is, what can I contribute toward changing this outcome? If it's providing resources for kids leading independent living, if it's tutoring, if it is making sure that you join the coalition, whatever it is, be able to articulate what you're doing and take more of a collective leadership approach, because we're all part of the problem and we're all part of the solution. Okay. Last question, you've got legislators here. When they ask, so what legislators should we be talking to? You should talk to yours at home. And you should tell them that story you have and show them. I know people always say, oh, bring them to your facility. No, call them, keep them informed, keep them updated. And from the work that we've been doing with the Sunflower Fellows, it's after the election, but it's time to turn up the heat and to step on the gas. It's not time to back away from really making sure that people get out to vote. One of the things one of our organizations is doing is starting a voter registration drive with their clients and with their employees. You can do that at work. Because yes, there were a lot of people who voted for legislators who did not support Medicaid expansion. And I bet there's some of you in this room that did. So you've got to find out more about who are the people making your decisions, give them the information, and like I said, step on the gas. I think I would leave you with a lot of the advocacy activity you have to do that I know I have to do. We have to be hyper-local. And yes, the legislative session is coming up, but we really need to turn our expertise and our questions to build that momentum, because we've got 2 years until the next election. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Melissa.